It started with a postcard that wasn't even meant for me. Or at least, that's what I thought. It showed up in my mailbox on a gray Tuesday in March, wedged between a grocery flyer and a credit card offer. The front was a photo of an old rusted truck sitting in the middle of a sunflower field, bathed in golden light. The kind of photo that feels like a memory you don't remember having. I turned it over, expecting some random scribble or maybe one of those wish you were here messages people still write to their moms. Instead, it read, "The way this place feels at sunset, it's like time pauses. You'd get it." There was no name, just the letter L in a P.O. box in Denver, no return address, no full name. Just L. I almost tossed it in the recycling bin. Almost. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the handwriting. Smooth, clean, almost too deliberate. Or the message itself. Not flashy, not dramatic. Just quiet. Personal. Like whoever wrote it actually believed the person reading would understand, that they knew them. Except I didn't. I had no idea who L was. And I sure as hell hadn't been to Denver. I chalked it up to a postal mistake, threw it on the table, forgot about it. Until the next month, another postcard, this time from Santa Cruz. A wide shot of the ocean at dusk. The waves, soft, glassy, rolling toward the camera like they were coming for you gently. On the back, you ever hear the ocean breathe? If you sit still long enough, you can hear it inhale. Still signed L. Same handwriting. Same Denver P.O. box. And this time, my name was on it. Spelled right. I stood there on my front porch with my mail still half clutched in my hand, reading it over and over, as if maybe I'd missed something. But there it was. Addressed to me. My name, my apartment number. No one had ever sent me a postcard before. Not even my exes. Not even my mom. The weirdest part? It didn't feel creepy. It felt warm, gentle, almost like an inside joke between strangers. By the time I got the third one, a shot of a diner in the middle of nowhere, neon lights flickering above a row of parked bikes, I had started looking forward to them. I'd check the mail every afternoon with a weird sort of nervous anticipation, like I was waiting to hear from a pen pal I never signed up for. I kept telling myself it was probably a mistake, a marketing stunt, a friend playing a trick. But it didn't feel like any of that. It felt like something else entirely. Because every message was just specific enough to feel personal, but vague enough to be universal, like fortune cookies for the emotionally constipated. Still, I had no idea who L was, or why they were sending these cards. And then, one day, I got bold. I wrote back, just one line. I've been reading. Who are you? I mailed it to the P.O. box address, not really expecting a reply. Maybe part of me hoped it would just stop there, that I'd get my answer and be done with the whole weird mystery. But the next card came anyway, this time from Portland. On the front, an old record store. Faded pink walls, records displayed in the window like trophies. On the back, I'm not trying to be anyone, just trying to see if someone's listening. No signature this time, just the city. Portland. That was when I realized something. This wasn't a mistake. Someone out there meant to send these to me. Someone who knew my name, my address, and maybe even what I needed to hear. I started keeping them in a shoebox under my bed. Lined up in order, month by month, like puzzle pieces I hadn't figured out how to fit together yet. Then, 3 days before my birthday, I got one that changed everything. The photo was of a trail winding through a forest, sunlight breaking through the trees in beams. On the back, in smaller handwriting than usual, it said, "I'll be in your city on the 21st. I'll be at Logan's Cafe, noon. If you want to know more, come." No pressure, no weird threats, just an invitation. And for the first time in my life, I had no idea if I should be terrified or excited. But I knew one thing for sure. I was going. I didn't sleep the night before. I kept thinking about what I would say, what he might look like. I imagined all kinds of possibilities. A traveling poet, a quiet photographer, some quirky guy with an old film camera and a denim jacket covered in pins from national parks. Or maybe he wasn't like that at all. Maybe he was just some guy, regular. Maybe this would be a complete letdown. And I'd walk into Logan's Cafe only to find someone looking just as confused as I was. I kept telling myself not to romanticize it, but it was too late for that. By the time morning came, I had changed shirts 3 times and checked my hair in the mirror at least a dozen. I wasn't even sure why I cared that much. It wasn't a date. I didn't even know this person. And yet it felt important. Like whatever was about to happen had been building toward me for months. Maybe longer than that, if I was being honest with myself. Logan's was a small coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore. I used to come here a lot when I first moved to the city, before life got busy and everything started blending together. The smell hit me as soon as I walked in: espresso, cinnamon, old wood. The sound of low conversation, the hiss of steam, the quiet murmur of indie music playing from a speaker above the counter. I glanced around, heart hammering. There were only a few people there: a woman in her 60s reading a newspaper, 2 guys with laptops, earbuds in, a barista refilling the napkin dispensers. No one stood out. Then I saw him. He was sitting near the back, at a 2-top table by the window. A small ceramic mug sat in front of him, still steaming. He was looking outside, fingers lightly drumming on the tabletop. He looked like he'd been waiting a while, but not impatiently. Like someone used to being alone with his thoughts. He wasn't what I expected. No camera, no quirky outfit, just a plain navy sweater, jeans, and a simple silver ring on his right hand. His hair was a mess in the way that looked unintentional, like he'd just run his hand through it a bunch of times and called it a day. But what struck me most were his eyes. They were the kind of eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and still chose to be kind. He glanced up, met my gaze, and for a split second, neither of us moved. Then he smiled. It wasn't dramatic or movie-worthy. It was just real. "Hey," he said as I walked over, his voice low, a little raspy. "You're L," I said, not even bothering to sit down yet. He nodded. "Liam," I blinked. "That's it? Just Liam?" He chuckled. "It's what my mom called me. Figured it was as good a letter as any." I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down, heart pounding. "Why me?" Liam leaned back in his chair, studying me like he was trying to decide where to start. "Because I found your name in a secondhand book." That caught me off guard. "What?" He reached into his backpack and pulled out a worn paperback. He placed it gently on the table between us. The spine was cracked, the corners bent. I recognized it immediately. The Perks of Being a Wallflower, one of my favorites. I donated it during a spring cleaning spree 2 years ago. "I picked this up at a used bookstore in Boulder," Liam said. It had a name and an address written inside the cover. I leaned forward. Sure enough, there it was. My name in my messy handwriting. And below it, my old address. "Why'd you send the first postcard?" I asked. "I mean, most people would just ignore something like that." He shrugged, then looked a little embarrassed. "Honestly, I was lonely. I'd just gotten out of something bad. I was couch hopping, working part-time, moving city to city. That book felt like someone had left a piece of themselves behind. Like whoever you were, you'd felt things deeply. I don't know why I sent it. I just did. I figured you'd never see it anyway." "But I did." "Yeah," he said, his smile softening. "That surprised me." I didn't know what to say to that. My fingers brushed the edge of the book and something twisted in my chest. I thought about how many times I'd read those pages during hard weeks, how I'd cried on them, underlined sentences that made me feel less alone. "You sent one every month," I said quietly. "I didn't think you'd ever write back. But I liked the idea of sending something out into the world, like a little ritual." My throat felt tight. "And when I did write back?" He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. "That scared me." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I understood. "Yeah, me too." We sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward, just quiet. Liam cleared his throat. "I didn't expect this to feel so real." I finished for him. He nodded. "Yeah, like we're catching up instead of meeting." I smiled. "You write like someone who's trying to be invisible and noticed at the same time." He looked startled, then a little shy. That's exactly how I feel most days. We talked for an hour after that. Maybe 2. I lost track. He told me about the cities he'd been to. Some he loved, some he only stayed in long enough to get paid and move on. I told him about my job, my shitty apartment with the broken radiator, my failed attempts at dating apps. I went on a date with a guy last month who asked if I believed in ghosts, I said. And then, halfway through the meal, told me he was one. Liam burst out laughing. Okay, that might beat the guy that first met in Tucson, who said his chakras refused to align unless he was within 200 feet of a crystal. We talked until our coffee got cold, until the barista turned up the lights and started sweeping. Neither of us wanted to be the first to stand up. So, I said finally, pushing my mug away, what happens now? Liam looked at me, eyes soft. Now, I stay in one place. For a while, if that's okay with you. My heart did a weird little skip. It is. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out another postcard. This one was blank. He handed it to me, along with a pen. Write something? He asked. For me this time. I hesitated, then wrote, This coffee shop smells like beginnings. I passed it back to him, and he smiled like I'd just given him something valuable. That's how it started. Not with fireworks or a kiss. Just a coffee, a conversation, and a postcard with a message only we understood. Liam stayed. That was the first surprise. He found a short-term sublet in a brick building not far from the cafe where we met, the kind with slanted hardwood floors and radiators that worked when they felt like it. His place was small, barely enough room for a twin bed, a desk, and his duffel bag. But he didn't seem to mind. He said he was used to moving, used to things that didn't last. But now, he said, he was trying something different. We didn't talk about what different meant. Not at first. I didn't want to spook it, whatever was happening between us. So we kept it light, easy. We got coffee together a few more times that first week. Then dinner. Then a late night walk that turned into sitting on a park bench until 3 a.m. Just talking. We never ran out of things to say. He told me about hitching rides across New Mexico, about sleeping on couches in friends of friends' basements, about the job he'd had painting houses for a guy named Ron who always paid in cash and unsolicited life advice. He talked about growing up in a town where being quiet made you suspicious, and sensitive made you weak. I used to think I had to leave everything to find anything, he said one night, voice soft in the dark. I nodded, not saying anything. I knew that feeling. The postcards didn't stop, even after we started seeing each other in person. He kept sending them, always one a month, always handwritten, always arriving like clockwork. I'd come home from work, check my mailbox, and there it would be. Another square piece of his mind, sealed in ink and curiosity. I never asked why he kept sending them, now that we saw each other almost every day. I think part of me didn't want him to stop. One read, You looked tired this morning. Like you're carrying something you forgot how to name. If I could take some of it for you, I would. Another, There's this tree in the park that always loses its leaves before the others. I think I love it for that. It reminds me that breaking first doesn't mean breaking wrong. I kept them all. Sometimes I'd reread them when he wasn't around, like I needed proof he was real. I don't think he realized how much they meant. We didn't label what we were doing. Not right away. We just were. We took walks, shared meals, stood too close on the subway. I caught myself watching him when he wasn't looking, when he was chewing the end of a pen or laughing at something on his phone or looking up from a book with that slightly dazed expression like the world had snuck up on him. One night, about 6 weeks in, we were in his apartment. He'd made us pasta, way too much garlic, but I didn't say anything, and we ended up sitting on his floor, backs against the wall, plates balanced on our knees. He set his plate down halfway through and said, without looking at me, I haven't stayed in one place this long since high school. I looked over. He was staring at the opposite wall like it held answers. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I asked. He paused, then said, "I'm still figuring that out." There was a weight to his voice I hadn't heard before. Not fear, exactly, but something close to it. I set my plate down too. "You thinking about leaving?" His head turned sharply toward me. "No," he said, fast. "No, I just—" He trailed off, chewing on his bottom lip like the words were too sharp to say out loud. I didn't push. I knew that look. We sat there in the quiet for a while. The only sound was the ticking of the radiator and the distant hum of the street outside. Finally, he said, "I think I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. It's hard to believe in good things when you've only ever known temporary ones. So I leaned a little closer, our knees touching, and said, "If it drops, we'll pick it up together." He smiled then. Soft, like he didn't quite believe me but wanted to. That night when I got home, I found another postcard in my mailbox. This one had no photo, just plain white stock with a simple line of text in the center. Sometimes I think we meet people to remind us we're allowed to stay. No signature, no date. Just that. I sat down on the edge of my bed, card in my hand, and read it over and over until the words started to feel like a prayer. Maybe that's what this was turning into. Not a story, not a romance, but a kind of quiet salvation. And I wasn't ready for it to end. Spring blurred into summer before I realized how much time had passed. Liam had been in the city for nearly 4 months by then, though it felt like both a moment and a lifetime. We'd slipped into each other's lives so naturally it was hard to remember a version of my daily routine where he wasn't in it. Texting me about the weird sandwich he just ate, nudging his shoulder against mine when we crossed the street, showing up outside my building with 2 iced coffees and a half smile that made my chest ache in the best way. Still, we hadn't defined anything. Not in words. We slept in separate beds, but there were nights when I'd fall asleep, replaying the way his eyes lingered when we said goodbye. How sometimes he'd reach out like he was going to touch my hand, and then didn't. How our silences had started to feel like whole conversations. Then came the night it shifted. It was early June, one of those humid evenings where the air feels like a damp towel pressed against your skin. We were walking home from a movie, both a little buzzed from cheap wine at a corner bistro we'd impulsively ducked into. I don't even remember what the movie was. All I remember is how he kept brushing against me as we walked, his hand grazing mine, his laugh a little louder than usual, the way his shoulder stayed just barely pressed to mine as we walked side by side. It wasn't a mistake. Not anymore. When we got to my building, I didn't even pretend to fumble for my keys. He didn't ask to come up. He just followed me. My apartment was dim and a little too warm, the kind of heat that made every breath feel heavier. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my keys onto the counter, turned to say something, and found him already watching me. There was something about the way he was standing. Still, but not frozen, like he was weighing something invisible in his chest. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded slowly, then said, "I think so." I stepped closer. That didn't sound super convincing. Liam didn't move. "I'm okay," he said again, a little steadier. I've never had this, whatever this is." I felt my throat tighten. I mean, he exhaled. When he wrote back to me, I thought maybe it was a one-off. Maybe you were just being polite. Or curious. But then we met. And then I stayed. And now I'm in your apartment again. And I keep trying to convince myself not to ruin it by wanting more. The silence that followed was so thick, I almost couldn't breathe through it. But then I took a step forward, just enough to close the distance between us, and said, "What if I want more too?" Liam blinked, like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. I smiled, nervous, but sure. I've been thinking about it since the second postcard. I just didn't know if it was real, or just something I built up in my head. "It's real," he said fast. "God, it's so real." Neither of us moved for a second, and then he kissed me. It wasn't perfect. His nose bumped mine. Our teeth clicked awkwardly, but none of that mattered. His hands cupped my face, like I was something breakable and worth holding. My fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, like I'd been waiting to pull him close. Since the moment I read his first line of ink, that kiss felt like the end of a long sentence we'd both been trying to finish for months. And when we finally pulled apart, breathless and dazed, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I don't want to leave." "Good," I said, voice barely more than a breath. "I don't want you to." He stayed that night. We didn't have closeness. We didn't need to. We curled into my bed like we'd been doing it for years, limbs tangled, his head tucked into my shoulder, his fingers tracing lazy shapes against my arm. "I used to sleep on buses," he murmured sometime after midnight. "Trains, airport floors, wherever I landed. I used to think not belonging anywhere was kind of romantic. I didn't say anything, just let him talk. But now," he said, voice sleep slow, "I think I'd rather belong somewhere, to someone." I tightened my arm around him. "You already do." A few days later, a new postcard arrived. It was postmarked from here, from our own city. A photo of a cracked sidewalk with wildflowers pushing through the concrete. On the back, it said, "Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person. And sometimes it's you." That postcard, the one with the flowers breaking through the sidewalk, sat on my nightstand for days. I didn't move it. I'd glance at it while brushing my teeth, or when I woke up tangled in blankets and the lingering smell of Liam still clinging to the sheets. That card felt different than the others, like a quiet, wordless promise. Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person. And sometimes it's you. I read those lines so many times they started to feel like lyrics to a song I'd known all my life but only just remembered. Liam had started keeping a drawer at my place. Not a bag, not a box, a whole drawer. Half the time he still called his apartment the other spot, like he was trying to keep a foot out the door, just in case. But he always came back. And when he didn't, I missed him in a way that felt absurd for something so new. One night I came home late from work, tired and grimy and ready to collapse. But the lights were on in my kitchen. I opened the door to the smell of tomato soup, his favorite. Steam curling from the pot on the stove. He poked his head out from around the corner. "Hey, thought I'd make something before you got in." I dropped my bag and just stared at him. He wore one of my hoodies, too big on him, sleeves bunched around his hands. His hair was a mess, and he had tomato sauce on his cheek. I had this ridiculous moment where I wanted to say something dramatic like, "God, I think I'm falling in love with you," but instead I said, "You used the garlic powder, didn't you?" He grinned. "Guilty." We ate dinner cross-legged on the couch, watching reruns of some terrible 90s sitcom. He curled into my side after, his head against my chest. The TV buzzed softly in the background, but I wasn't really listening. My fingers moved through his hair without thinking. It felt like second nature. "Did you always know?" he asked out of nowhere. I looked down at him. "Know what?" "That I was gay, or into you, or not straight." He didn't sound self-conscious, just curious, like he was working through something in real time. I thought about it. "I didn't know," I said finally. "But the way you wrote, I don't know. There was softness in your words. Something honest. It felt like someone who was still figuring things out, but wanted to be seen anyway." Liam was quiet for a long time. "I fought it for a long time," he said. "Not the attraction part, that was always there, but the part where I let myself be that person." "Gay," he nodded. "I didn't grow up somewhere where that was safe. Not even just because of other people, but because I didn't know how to give myself permission." I pressed a kiss to his forehead. "You don't need permission anymore." He looked up at me, eyes soft. "I know. That's the scary part." That conversation hung between us for a while. Not heavy, exactly, but full, like we were peeling back another layer between us, letting the real things sit out in the open. That night, when he fell asleep next to me, one hand curled under his chin like a kid, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about how easily he slipped into my life, how easily he fit. I thought about how it started with a postcard that wasn't meant for me, or maybe it was all along. Maybe the universe got tired of waiting for me to believe something good could happen and decided to send it through the mail. The next morning, there was another card in my mailbox. No photo this time, just a blank white card. No printed design, just his handwriting in the middle of it. This isn't a love letter. But if it were, it'd say I've never felt safer falling asleep beside someone in my whole life. That was the first time he didn't sign with just L. He signed it Liam. That weekend, he brought over more than a drawer's worth of things. A couple of books, a thrifted record player that only worked when you taped the needle down just right, a stack of mismatched mugs, and his presence, warm, steady, a little clumsy in the mornings, always humming under his breath while brushing his teeth. It was subtle, how we shifted from two people orbiting each other to something more rooted, something shared. One night, while we were folding laundry, he looked over at me and said, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "I haven't mailed a postcard this month." I raised an eyebrow. "You're slacking." He laughed. "Well, I think it's because I don't need to send one." "Oh? You're already here. I don't have to write to you anymore." I nodded slowly. "Still kind of want you to." He tilted his head, smirking. "Yeah? Yeah. I like the idea of finding little pieces of you in the mailbox. Like you're still sending yourself to me, even if you never left." Liam looked at me for a long moment, then grabbed a blank postcard from the drawer where we kept random stationery. He wrote something on it, stuck it under the fridge magnet, and didn't say a word. It sat there all week before I finally read it. "You'll never have to wonder if I love you. But if you ever forget, check the mail." By the time fall rolled around, Liam and I had developed a rhythm so seamless it felt like music. Not the kind you dance to, but the kind that played softly in the background while you cooked a dinner barefoot or read on a rainy Sunday afternoon. The kind of rhythm you didn't notice until it wasn't there. He made the bed in the mornings. I did the dishes. He liked grocery shopping. I hated it. I remembered to take out the trash. He remembered everything else. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We didn't talk about the postcards anymore. Not really. They'd become part of the background too, like our morning routines or his awful coffee habit. He still sent them, once a month, without fail. But now they were tucked into the cracks of our life, found on the kitchen counter next to the cereal, or slipped under my windshield wiper when I left work. Sometimes they were poetic. "You smell like sleep and the sea, and something I want to keep forever." Sometimes they were stupid. "You left the stove on. Again. But it's okay. I love you even when you're trying to burn the apartment down." And sometimes they were quiet, like a whisper. "You were humming this morning in the shower." I didn't recognize the song, but I think it was the sound of someone who's safe. I kept them all, pinned them up on a corkboard above my desk until the wall started to look like a scrapbook of invisible things. Moments, feelings, little pieces of him written down like breadcrumbs leading back to us. Then November hit, and everything paused. Liam's dad had a stroke. I found him in the kitchen that morning, phone in one hand, the other gripping the edge of the counter like the laminate, was the only thing keeping him upright. He didn't cry. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, pale and still, eyes glazed over like he was somewhere else. When he finally spoke, his voice was thin. "I have to go." "Of course," I said immediately, stepping closer. "I'll go with you." But he shook his head. "No, I need to do this alone." I could have argued. Part of me wanted to, but I knew him well enough by then to recognize that look in his eyes, the one that said he wasn't shutting me out, just trying to hold something fragile together. So I nodded, kissed his forehead, packed him a bag. He left the next morning before sunrise. The apartment felt hollow without him. I kept busy. Work, laundry, organizing the spice rack. Anything to distract myself from the quiet Liam always filled. I told myself it was only temporary. A week, maybe 2. Long enough for him to help, to be there, to come back with that same sleepy smile I'd gotten used to seeing over coffee. But days passed. Then a week. Then 2. The first postcard came 12 days after he left. It was from a hospital gift shop. A photo of a sad-looking teddy bear holding a heart-shaped balloon. On the back, he wrote, "Dad's lucid for now. Told me he still thinks I should marry a nice girl and stop pretending." I didn't tell him about you. I'm not ready. I'm sorry. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after reading it. I understood. But it still hurt. The second card came a week later. A photo of a diner. Probably the only one in whatever small town he was in. On the back, I think I used to confuse being invisible with being safe. Now I just feel like I'm hiding from something I actually want. Miss you, every second. He didn't say when he'd be back. I didn't ask. I wanted to call. To tell him I didn't care what his dad thought, that I loved him anyway. But I didn't want to crowd him. He was still learning how to be himself in places that had only ever known versions of him he'd outgrown. The third card came on a Wednesday. No photo this time. Just the words. You said once that you liked finding me in the mailbox. I hope this still counts. I think I love you. I don't know how to say it in person yet, but it's true. It's all true. I read it 5 times before my hand stopped shaking. Then I cried. Not because I was sad, but because it was the first time I realized I didn't need him to be standing in front of me to feel his love. That night, I wrote him back. A postcard I had been saving for months, one with a photo of a bench in Central Park during fall, leaves scattered like confetti. On the back, I wrote, I don't care if your dad never knows. I don't care if the world never sees us. I see you, I know you, and I love you. That's enough. Come home when you're ready. I'll be here. I mailed it the next morning and waited. I didn't know how long it would take for him to come back, or if he even would. But I left the porch light on every night, like some part of me believed he'd show up at any moment, duffel bag in hand, apologetic smile on his face. The kind of thing you see in movies and don't expect to happen in real life. But then again, I hadn't expected a stranger to start writing me postcards either. The days dragged. Thanksgiving came and went. I told my friends I wasn't doing anything, turned down dinner invites, and ended up eating boxed mac and cheese on the couch with a rerun of Friends playing too loud in the background. I kept checking the mail, even though I told myself not to. And then one Friday afternoon, just as I was walking up the steps to my building, I saw it. A small, white envelope sticking out of the mailbox. No stamp. Hand-delivered. It wasn't a postcard this time. Just my name, written in Liam's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a note. A single page, folded once. I read it right there in the hallway, leaning against the wall, heart pounding in my chest. I came back. But I didn't knock. I stood outside your building for a long time with this in my hand, trying to figure out if I deserve to still have you waiting inside. Truth is, I don't know. But I've spent the last few weeks walking through old neighborhoods that never felt like mine, sleeping in a bed that felt colder than I remembered, listening to my dad snore in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and bad coffee. And all I could think about was you, the way you made the bed after I left, the way you kissed me before I could panic, the way you let me go without making it harder than it already was. I realized something. You were the only person I've ever felt completely safe with. Not just comfortable, safe. The kind of safe where I don't have to hold my breath or perform or shrink to make room for someone else's expectations. So I'm writing this instead of knocking, because I'm still learning how to show up as the real me. But I want to knock. I want to come home. I want to be the guy who doesn't just send postcards anymore. I want to be yours. Liam? By the time I looked up, he was already standing there, on the sidewalk, just a few steps away. Same worn hoodie, same tired eyes, same hopeful, crooked smile. We didn't say anything at first. I walked down the steps toward him, slow, like I didn't quite believe he was real. He held his breath. I could see it in the way his chest rose just once and then stopped, frozen mid-air. I read it, I said. Yeah? He asked, voice shaking. I want you to knock next time. I will, he whispered. Then I kissed him. There wasn't anything polite about it. No hesitation. Just months of waiting and missing and forgiving poured into one messy, desperate kiss in the middle of the sidewalk. He dropped his bag as he kissed me back. When we pulled apart, he leaned his forehead against mine and said, "You really kept all of them?" I nodded. "Every single one." "I brought one more," he said, reaching into his pocket. It was smaller than the others, folded in half. Not even a real postcard, just a square of cardboard he must have cut from something else. On it, he'd written, "This is the last one I'll send. From now on, I'm just gonna tell you in person, I love you." He moved in officially 2 weeks later. No ceremony, no big announcement. Just boxes showing up one by one, a hoodie draped over the back of my chair, his toothbrush next to mine, his books mixed into my shelves. One morning, I opened the fridge and saw his weird oat milk next to my regular one, and I smiled like a complete idiot. That was the moment it hit me. This was real. We still had our own routines, our quiet. He liked sitting on the floor when he read. I liked doing the dishes with music playing. He took long showers. I drank coffee way too fast, but the space between us no longer felt like a line we were afraid to cross. It was home now. He never stopped writing. The postcards changed form. They weren't mailed anymore, not unless I was traveling, or he was. Instead, he left them around the apartment. On my pillow, in the back pocket of my jeans. Once, taped to the carton of eggs in the fridge. Some were one-liners. "You looked beautiful when you burned the toast this morning. I love the way your voice sounds when you talk to the dog on the street like it's a person." Others were deeper, like letters he didn't know how to say out loud yet. "Every time I start to doubt I'm worth being loved, you undo it without even trying." I asked him once why he kept writing. We were lying in bed, the sheets tangled around our legs, both of us half asleep. He yawned, then said, "Because there's something about seeing it in writing, like it makes it more real." I nodded. "You don't have to convince me. I've got a drawer full of proof." "Still have all of them?" he asked, eyes barely open. "Of course." He smiled against my shoulder. "Someday we'll be 80 and reading them out loud on the porch." "Promise?" I murmured. "Promise." 6 months later, on the anniversary of the day we met, exactly 1 year since that first message arrived in my mailbox, he gave me a small brown box. Inside were 12 postcards, each one from the last year, rewritten in his handwriting, all of them laminated, numbered in the corner. "I wanted to keep them," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "To have the full set, our story." I was speechless. "I thought you might want to read them again, this time knowing who I was when I wrote them," he added. "Not some ghost, just me." We sat on the couch and read every one. From the rusted truck in the sunflower field, to the diner in the desert, to the blank card that simply said, "I think I love you." And then, at the bottom of the box, there was a 13th postcard. This one was new. On the front, a photo of a key resting on an open palm. On the back, it started with a postcard. I never expected it to lead me here, but I'm glad it did. I want to keep writing our story, every day, every chapter, if you'll have me. When I looked up, he was holding out a small keychain with both of our initials on it. My voice caught in my throat. "Is this?" "It's not a proposal," he said quickly, laughing nervously. "I mean, not yet. Just a question. If you'd let me stay, for good this time." I reached for him, pulled him in, kissed him, soft and slow. "You're already home," I whispered. That night, I found a fresh postcard tucked under my pillow. No photo. Just a single line. "There are some things I'll never stop saying. I love you is one of them." And underneath, in tiny print, "P.S. Check the mailbox tomorrow." I did. Inside was another card, blank on the front, but on the back, it read, "You and me, always, postmarked forever."